So we read the whole thing, and I'm going to fly through what we've already done, and we're seeing the Sadducees now, and they're becoming concerned about Jesus as well. So so Pharisees and Sadducees, think like, and I think I've already told you this, but like political parties. Think Democrats and Republicans. And they had some different beliefs. I think we've already talked about how the Sadducees didn't believe in the resurrection. Not the resurrection of Jesus. They didn't believe in that either. But this theological belief that Jews and Christians both believe is that at the end of time, everyone who is alive or dead will rise and go to heaven and be judged, whether they go to heaven or hell. And so the Sadducees didn't believe that. They didn't believe that there would be a resurrection at the end of time. So that's what that means. It's not Jesus's resurrection. And their problem is, both the Sadducees and the Pharisees, their problem is that Jesus is popular. The people love Jesus. They're running all around and to get to him, and crowds follow him everywhere they go, and so they're upset about that. Now they're upset about that in part, as you see in the third one, that there was maybe going to be a revolt against the Jewish leadership. But I think the main thing is that Jesus was getting more followers than them, and Jesus was more popular than them, and they were jealous of Jesus. I think that had something to do with it, because the public opinion was in Christ's favor. And the possibility of another revolution, and that had happened before. The Jews had been run over many times, right, and taken captive, and they had a long history of being ruled by people other than themselves. So this is what it says here. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council, the Sanhedrin, and said, "What are we to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans instead of us." And the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. And it wasn't an unfounded fear. That could have happened. And it had happened before. So Caiaphas solves that problem, supposedly. And he proposes killing Jesus to save the nation. But one of them, Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation would perish." So what he's saying is, if we get rid of Jesus, Rome won't come down on us. If we get rid of Jesus, we don't have this guy that we're tangling with in our space. And so he's saying, let's just kill Jesus, basically. And he thinks that's going to solve everything. Obviously, he's wrong about that. Well, that is in some ways, but not for him. It's not going to go well for him. And so this is the philosophy is the end justifies the means. And what that means is that if the end goal is good, it doesn't matter how you get there. So if the goal is 100% on my next test, I'll just cheat and I'll get a good grade. And so because it's a good end, it doesn't matter how we get there. Now, by the way, that doesn't work, and it's not true, because you know how we know this, and I'm gonna give you a sneak peek of next year's Bible class. How do you react when people are mean? Yeah, or maybe angry. Yeah, but you're hurt by that, right? And we understand it when it happens to us, right? but we all treat other people wrongly at some point, right? And we say, well, I was just kidding. But when it happens to us, we know it's wrong. And we'll talk more about that next year. But so, and then I'm going to remind you once again that the timing in the book is skewed because they believe in a Thursday crucifixion. And I went through all of that and told you what I meant by that yesterday. But we won't use any of the timing because they believe that Jesus was crucified on Thursday. What? Why do they think that? Because of the way. So well, first of all, it says in the Bible that Jesus um, was raised on the third day, uh, and uh, and the Jews counted differently than we do, and they also believed that any part of a day was a day and a night. And so they say, well, it's 3 days and 3 nights, and if that's not 3 days and 3 nights, if it's Friday, because we say the first day is the next day, right? And then the second day, and so Thursday, right? So then Friday would be the first day, Saturday would be the second day, and then the third day would be Sunday, resurrection, right? But that's not how ancient people counted. The first day was that day, the day the thing happened. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and any part of a day was a day and a night. So that's why they get that on Thursday. And I need to hasten to tell you, it is a minority view. Most Christians believe that Jesus was raised or was not raised. Everybody knows it's Sunday. Died on Friday. Um, um, but there's nothing. I mean, it's and I believe that's true. But there's no big deal in saying it was Thursday. And we could be wrong, right? And they could be right. But that doesn't change anything about it, right? It's not like, oh, the disciples, stole the body, so there wasn't a resurrection. It's nothing like that. So just let them think it's Thursday, and we'll see what happens. And I'll say I'm sorry to all of them if I'm wrong. Um, so. Uh, So then Jesus goes away for a little bit. He retreats from the public view. He goes to Ephraim, which is north east of Jerusalem, and he takes his disciples with him. And we don't know exactly why he was doing that, but he did know that he was about to die. And I think, and Jerusalem was in a fervor because of him. So he went about 20 miles away from northeast from Jerusalem, and he took his disciples and he stayed there. And I think part of that reasoning was to have some downtime and then have some time with his disciples. And he was probably preparing them. He'll do more of that in the upper room when we get to the Last Supper, and we'll talk about that. But I think he's probably already, and we have seen already, that he is preparing his disciples for what's about to happen in not too many days hence. So, hang on. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, "What are we to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation." But one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish." He did not say this on his own accord, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation, and not for the nation only, but also to gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. So he's unwittingly prophesying about Jesus. I don't think he would have been very happy if he knew that. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, "What are we to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come away and take away both our place and our nation." And then this is the last retreat that he's going to with his with his disciples in Ephraim. So now we're at the public's curious interest, and this is getting close to where we left off yesterday. So it's 6 days before the Passover, and Jesus arrives in Bethany. And he probably stayed at Lazarus' home and with his Lazarus and his sisters. And we'll talk about that in the next lesson. But word would spread that he was there, and so people arrived trying to see Jesus. And they wanted to see Lazarus too, because they wanted to make sure he really was alive. I mean, he was something of an enigma because he died and then he came back to life. So because of that, they decide, the Jewish leadership decides to kill Lazarus too. And if you're going to follow Christ, there is a cost. One of my favorite books. I have two favorite books. And one of them is by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and it's called The Cost of Discipleship. And if you are going to follow Jesus, there will be a cost. You might lose friends. God might call you to something that you don't want to do. And even though in our country, at this point, we don't suffer for our faith, that doesn't mean it will always be that way. And for Dietrich Bonhoeffer, he paid with his life in Nazi Germany. And so it can cost us. We just had a couple come lead us for a day who will be at least imprisoned and possibly martyred if they're found out. And yet they're still going. Jim Elliot was a missionary to the in Ecuador. He and his wife Elizabeth Elliot, and the most famous quote of Jim Elliot was this: "He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." I'm going to read that again. He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. In other words, giving up our life for Christ gives us eternal life. And that's not foolish. That's wise. And so he and his wife and their young daughter went down to Ecuador to try and evangelize the Auca Indians. And they started out with dropping stuff from the plane, like food and different things and messages and all that. And they did that for quite some time, and they thought that they were ready. They thought that the Auca Indians were ready for face-to-face communication, but they weren't. And the men, they were ambushed, and Jim and I believe most of the other men died. And his widow, Elizabeth Elliot, um, initially took their daughter to the United States, but then she went back down to Ecuador and also evangelized those same Indians, the Indians that killed her husband, and they came to Christ, and they are following Christ to this day. So he is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. And we have even um, a country close to our borders, an island, a warm island, where if people there um, who are naming the name of Christ, they'll be arrested. We need to be grateful for the freedom. Not everyone has that. So let's talk about this royal entry, this Palm Sunday is what we call it these days. So the Bible doesn't record the events of uh, Friday and Saturday, but on Sunday it picks up with Jesus riding into Jerusalem on a donkey early in the morning. And they call this the 7 steps of the entry. So they he and his disciples walked from Bethany, where they had been, to Bethany. I know that looks like Bethphage, and everybody calls it that, but it's pronounced Bethany. And he sent 2 of his disciples to go get a colt, a young donkey that had never been ridden before. And so they went and got that for Jesus. And then so here's Bethany where they were. Here's Bethany. Bethany is literally on the Mount of Olives. Now, the Garden of Gethsemane is farther up, but it's on the Mount of Olives. Anybody want to go with me? Yeah. If you don't want to go, I want to go. I don't think I can, but I want to. So he got that colt from Bethany, and the disciple, or excuse me, and he rode that donkey down the slopes of the Mount of Olives, which is just across from the temple in Jerusalem. Um, and so we have this story of the triumphal entry in all 4 of the Gospels. It's one of the few stories that is in all 4 of the Gospels. So he walked from Bethany to Bethany, and then he stopped at Bethany to get the colt, and then the disciples got the donkey and brought it to Jesus, and they placed their cloaks on the saddle for Jesus, or on the burro for Jesus. And then he rode the donkey down the slopes of the Mount of Olives. And the people followed him, and they were shouting praises. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. That word Hosanna, it means oh save. They're saying save us, Jesus. And um, they're worshiping him and hailing him as their king, as he's going down the hill. And they're hoping that he will rid them of their Roman captors, their Roman oppressors. And the crowds rush, and they have palm branches. And as I said, they're saying, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And then Jesus is overcome, and he weeps. shortest verse in all of the Bible. Jesus wept. And it's not certain why he's weeping, but he's weeping over Jerusalem. And I believe that he is, and I could be wrong about this, but he's weeping over those who are lost. And he's possibly weeping for Judas. Because he knows what Judas is about to do. So then Jesus goes into the temple. He looks around for a little bit, and he leaves. And that too was fulfilling prophecy, that my Lord will come quickly into the temple. And so he's knowingly fulfilling these prophecies. He's doing what God has told him to do. Because he just enters the temple, looks around, and leaves. And it was kind of strange, and I'm sure people were like, why is he just doing that? And I think that after that whole big thing with Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, and he just goes into the temple and leaves, they might have been upset or disappointed. You know, he's our king. He's supposed to stay here. So the day began with a triumphal entry, but it ended in a fizzle of Jesus just walking in and walking out. Now, I'm going to talk about this, the donkey and all of that. By the way, this is a prophecy of Messiah. And so again, he is this prophecy is happening in front of their eyes. So rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion! Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem! Your king, behold, your king is coming to you, righteous and having salvation. Is he humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey? And we see this in John 12. John is saying, look at this Old Testament verse. This is what is happening here. So let's talk a little bit about kings and what they, and we talked about this yesterday a little bit, but in Deuteronomy 17, God tells the Jewish kings not to accumulate many donkeys or horses, excuse me, not to accumulate many horses, nor many wives. And Solomon and David, not Solomon, excuse me, Saul and David obeyed that pretty much. But Solomon grossly disobeyed. He gathered large numbers of horses and married many women, and as did the kings after Solomon. They forgot about that. But Jesus is fulfilling that prophecy in Zechariah 9:9. So they would have seen. We see like ancient kings and they're on horses, but by riding a colt, by riding a burro, he was fulfilling that prophecy, and he was saying, "I am a king." Because that's what the kings of Israel in times gone by rode. And the people understood that. That's why they were saying, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And oh, save. And he is our king. Unfortunately, people are fickle. On Friday, they're enthralled with Jesus. and praising Jesus. And only a few days later, on Friday, they're going to be saying, crucify him, crucify him. We have no king but Caesar. We do that sometimes too. I'm not saying we cry out, crucify him. But we're on fire for Jesus after a mission trip or a powerful chapel or a mountaintop experience. But then we slip back into sin and indifference. And here's the thing, the key is, the way to be constant is to stay grafted into the vine of Jesus. But that'll have to wait until another chapter. We'll talk about that later. Here is your quiz.